Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. As somebody commented, RIP Allison's channel, because we've got Ed Dowd here, who is the author of Cause Unknown, The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. So this is just a heads up. If you're watching this live or you end up watching this later on YouTube, you will be getting a Reader's Digest version of the topic. We hope that as we continue the conversation on ROKFIN and Rumble, that you'll be over there. The links are in the description. Ed, why don't you give us that Reader's Digest version of what Cause Unknown is about for the YouTube and other audience? And then, like I said, we'll go into detail on the other platforms. And thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem, Allison. Thank you. The bottom line is I'm a Wall Street professional. My biggest claim to fame is working at BlackRock for 10 years, managing a large cap growth portfolio that got to 14 billion. So my job was to analyze trends and pick stocks before everybody knew what was going on, find trends and anomalies and capitalize on them. So here I am looking at strange things going on in the health of this country. And The Cause Unknown is a book about what's going on mysteriously around the country and the globe. We're having a rash of sudden athletic deaths, but not only that, deaths in younger age cohorts across the globe, statistically and indisputably at this point. And also disabilities are on the rise, especially amongst the employed. And so the book details very carefully that first, is it true? And then it goes into more statistics apart from the athletic deaths into hard data and some analysis. On the athletic side, there was an incident on Monday. I'm not going to comment on that directly because it's an individual case, but I can speak to the numbers statistically. And there's a study that's been cited often, and it's in my book, called the Lausanne study. And it's not meant to be comprehensive, but it's the most comprehensive study out there. They documented over 38 years, 1,101 cases of sudden athletic deaths. And that comes up to about 29 a year. Since 2021, we'd be lucky to have a month with just 29. You know, in my book, I detail in the month of November, there was something like 100 and something, and then 90 in December. And it continues pretty alarmingly to this day. So first, is it true? Yes, it's true. It's not something we've seen before. Obviously, people are trying to figure out what the reason is, and we can talk about that later. But you know, if you move from the anecdotal sudden athletic deaths of younger people under ages 45 and 35, we can look at bigger data sets like group life insurance data. And the Society of Actuaries, and this is detailed in my book, put out a report in August, which is a survey of 80% of the revenues of the life insurance industry. And let me tell you what group life is. Group life is basically a policy you get when you work for a Fortune 500 company and or a mid-sized company. And it's one of these benefits you get when you sign on board. You get your health care, you pick your health care plan, then you have group life and disability. And all that requires you to do is sign the form and name a beneficiary. It's kind of a joke benefit. When I was, I signed these many times when I switched jobs. You know, when you're in your 30s, 20s, 40s, even 50s, you're not really thinking you're ever going to collect because you're healthy, because you're actually showing up to work. So to get a claim, you need to be employed at the time. You can't be retired or fired. So usually it's 1 to 2 times your base salary. And this is a great profitable business for the group life insurance industry. And just to give you some backdrop, they did a study in 2016, the Society of Actuaries, that proved that this population subset of the total US population was much healthier in general. In fact, they died at a third the rate of the general population in any given year. That makes sense because they're employed, able to show up to work, better educated, access to the best health care, and just physically able to get to work. So that group is statistically proven to be in better health. And in 2020, they were in better health. Their excess mortality versus the general US population was lower in 2020. Something mysteriously flipped in 2021, and we saw a mix shift from old to young in terms of excess mortality across not only in the CDC numbers, but this subset of the population. So table 5.7, if you have that handy. If you don't, you can put it up later.
Yes. Let me pull that up while you're talking.
Yeah.
Tee it up. What is it that we're about to look at?
Basically, what you're about to look at is the site of actuary table 5.7 broken down by age cohort. And basically, it shows that there was, in 2021, it varied throughout the year, but the total excess claims or deaths in this survey was 40% for the year of 2021. They looked at the national excess death. The general US population was 32%. That was basically 8 points higher, and that's never happened before in the history of the country, or at least the history of this data. Now, what's interesting, you're going to see in this graph, this chart, 100 is baseline normal claims expected. You can see in the third quarter of 2021, there was a spike in the millennials, 25 through 44. And it looks like, to me, that's about 84% if you average the two together. Myself and my insurance industry expert found out those numbers from the CDC in March. This was confirmed by the Society of Actuaries in August of 2021. So something happened in the third quarter of 2021 in an event, so to speak. And we can talk about that event and speculate as to what we thought might be going on there, but it's definitely an event. So there you go. That's just one data set, and I can talk about disabilities as well. If you have a question, go ahead.
Well, yeah. Why don't we talk about disabilities, and then I do have a question, kind of about how you, coming from BlackRock, got into all this. And honestly, there will be people, I'm sure you've heard, who would say, like, if you just Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever your search engine of choice is, BlackRock, I mean, you'll see like the evil empire, or the the company that's taking over the world. So I also wanted to ask you, like, why, when you come from a company that has I think fairly people are curious at best, if not maybe critical, would be a nice way to describe it. Why should they listen to somebody who comes from BlackRock about this stuff and trust anything that you say? And I only ask that just because I, also come from a corporate media. I get a lot too. You're just a hack or partisan hack, or you work for the evil empire. So why should I listen to you? So I pass that question on to you too. So either one, you could answer the disability or that first, but I'm just curious what you think.
Let's do the BlackRock first. I left BlackRock in 2012. So it's going on over 10 years now. So everybody that I used to work with is no longer there. I know no one at the firm. So when I was there, I liked working there. It was a firm that was doing well, but then they did a bunch of acquisitions. They did the Merrill Lynch asset management acquisition. I was there before that. Then they did the Barclays acquisition, and they kind of switched their business model from active investment, which is what I did, actually picking stocks with a human brain, to what's called passive investments, or ETFs. So the firm changed in and around 2011-12, and I decided to leave. So, it's a different firm than the one I was there. So I have no idea what's going on there. It's been over 10 years since I've been there. So I hope that answers people's questions. The firm kind of shifted its business model, and that's how they own the whole world. It's all through passive investments.
Okay, so thank you for answering that. Sometimes I get yelled at when I ask those questions, so I appreciate you didn't yell at me, but it would have been okay if you had.
No, not at all.
Yes. Okay. So talk to me about disabilities.
Sure. So prior to February of 2021, disability was kind of trending around on an absolute basis between 29 and 30 million annually, up and down, up and down, up and down. In February of 2021 through May of 21, there was an event that occurred that seemed to cause disabilities to rise. And it's now, so I just said 30 million. As of November of 2022, or September, the high point was September of 22, which was 33.2 million. It's come down a bit, but today the numbers were released and it's ticking back up. But what you need to know is the trend is unfortunately looking like a growth stock that broke out of a base. And statistically, we analyze the year-over-year rate of change in the disabilities for the whole U.S. population. and it's a 3 standard deviation event, meaning the slope of the rise is going on at such a speed that normally that only happens 0.03% of the time. So it's a trend change. So people are becoming more disabled more quickly than they have in the past. Now, when we break down the numbers, so that's about 3+ million additional disabled Americans since February of 21, as of December of this year. The December numbers just came out and they're ticking back up, like I said. But here's the analysis. You can break down the population, and you can look at different groups. You can look at total population, civilian labor force, or employed. The employed population is around 100 million. Those are the people that are actually willing and able to work and are working. That group had the largest rate of increase in their disability starting in February of 21, about 31%. The general U.S. population has had a rate of increase of about 8% in the disability rate since that time, between February 21 and November 21, or 22, sorry. And what's even more alarming is if you look at those not in labor force, those are the people who left the labor force throughout 21 and 22, their disability rate is 4% increase, rate of change in their disability rate. So between the group life policyholders, which is one data set, and the disability data sets, something is going on with the employed workforce of our country. In fact, I could say this statement quite honestly, and I think it holds true. It's been detrimental to your health to be employed in 2021 and 2022. Obviously, there might be questions as to what's causing that. We could certainly get into that later, but there's a trend, and the trend is a disaster. And I brought it up as a national security concern to some people in Washington. But what I do find interesting is our health authorities don't seem to be interested in talking about this at the moment. It's not even open for discussion, and it's not highlighted in the mainstream media. So there you have it. Those are the two data sets that speak to a national security crisis.
Something that does not speak to a national security crisis is AllisonWinePromo.com. Thanks, Ed, for teeing me up for this one. You can definitely go get AllisonWinePromo.com and help keep people like Ed on. And Ed, I will just tell people, we are going to explore the relationship between the mass vaccination campaign for COVID and the subject of today's discussion. Okay, we are going to talk about that. I think that's totally fine to say on YouTube. You know, if you didn't already know that, maybe you're sleeping through the first 5 minutes of the podcast. But I think we get away with that. You know, there are a lot of people that are questioning these numbers in relation to mass vaccination for COVID. Just asking the question. Now, as you mentioned, asking that question puts you in a particular category of social claymore nowadays. You can't ask about that. So I do have a question for you after I talk to people about wine for a second. So be thinking about this. What do you think, since I came from television news and I've seen just like the grotesque, frankly, coverage of this issue, how really, I mean, it's interesting you brought up Damar Hamlin. I mean, you didn't indirectly. I'll show you an article in a second that NPR wrote where they're totally speculating about what could have happened, even though they say at the beginning of the article, we don't know what happened, but this is probably what, and they just make up this theory about it. But when other people like you are asking legitimate questions about things that do appear to have some kind of correlation, maybe, you know, at least valid enough to ask, you are a conspiracy theorist. So I wanted to ask about that in a second, but everybody just make sure that if you're a wine drinker and you have not checked out AllisonWinePromo.com, remember, you get 50% off the wine itself and 50% off shipping. These are high altitude Malbecs, all of them. Extremist altitude Malbecs is what I like to say, because, you know, if you're not being labeled an extremist nowadays, then I really don't know why you haven't gotten your life together yet. Come on, you're doing nothing worth anything at this point if no one's called you an extremist. So go get some extremist altitude wine when you have grandma over after not talking to her for the last 3 years. It would be a great conversation piece. And like I said, they're good wines anyway, and you get them for a great price. So if you're a wine drinker, you've got no excuse. You can also go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, get some organic wines. These are USDA certified organic. They're also high altitude, extremist altitude coffees. You can get light roast, you can get dark roast, you can actually also get a Katura tea. I really like the tea. It's like a black tea. You can cold brew it, hot brew it. whatever you want. It's the fruit that goes around the coffee beans. Very good. Tastes like black tea, like I said. So thanks again for supporting my sponsors. Also, if you want to join my editorial board over at AllisonMorrow.locals.com, it's $5 a month. You can put in questions for some of the most censored people on the internet, like Ed Dowd. And we got a few questions for him, which we're going to do in a little bit. So go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com, help me pay for a babysitter, and get your questions in for these interviews. Thanks again, everybody who is already over on my editorial board. We do have a live chat going over there, so hope to see you there. All right. So Ed, yeah, let's talk about the media before we head over to Rumble and ROKFIN exclusively. I was already critical of my industry as I had my foot out the door. For even if I gave them the benefit of the doubt, like, because I was in it for a long time and really was kind of asleep, didn't really understand what I didn't know, and recycled press releases and talking points and took the government at its face value. And I wasn't asking a lot of questions, and I wasn't doing it for nefarious purposes. I just didn't know what I was talking about, frankly. Okay. Am I back?
You're
Just so
back.
you know, okay. My internet service provider, they're still drunk from New Year's. They got way too much Allison wine promo. So if I go away again, just take it away and talk about whatever you want. But remember, we're still on YouTube. Okay. All right. So my question is, the best case scenario, what do you think the media is up to in all of this? Worst case scenario, what's the media up to? And what has been their role in not just this topic, I guess, the actual outcome that you're looking into, the reality of it, but then also the folks like you who are asking questions about it and being snubbed. What's the role in that as well? So like actually driving the situation you're investigating, but then also the inability of one to question it.
So let's go back in history. So I'm a Wall Street guy, and I've been on Wall Street a long time. I'm 55 years old. So there was something done, I think, in the 1985 Telecommunications Act, which allowed for consolidation of media companies. The media used to be very disparate, and there used to be lots of companies competing for eyeballs and chasing down stories. Over the subsequent decades, there was a conglomeration of media companies and newspapers into basically 6 primary media properties. So there was consolidation, and that tends to lead to power, money, and greed, unfortunately. And also, the nature of the sponsors changed. And as you know, we'll talk about this group later, but there's a group that's a big contributor to the media ad revenue dollar sources. And so they have a lot of influence over what gets told to the American public, unfortunately. The other thing that happened is Google came on the scene in the early 2000s, and they disrupted the whole newspaper industry. They destroyed the help wanted ads. So revenue streams at newspapers declined, and the quality of the journalism started to decline because they had to, for cost reasons, get rid of the people that did investigatory work, that would break stories and hire young people that, didn't cost any money. So we've had like this kind of these two things come together: consolidation. Google disrupted the media industry, newspaper business. So there we go. And so here we are. We find ourselves, and not only that, but we also know for a fact that the government has been doling out money to media companies to promote certain things. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But the bottom line is, it's been what I call a conspiracy of interests to really cause what I call wholesale censorship.
Yeah, it's I'll just tell a quick anecdote from my experience over the last year, talking to one of my former coworkers who told me flat out that he has no empathy or sympathy for people who chose not to get the COVID vaccine, and because of that was not interested in something that I thought was a very valid story, because it was about how loss of employees for a particular government agency was going to affect public safety. So when you have reporters who also I think, have become sort of moral crusaders for particular causes and are proud of their ignorance about certain causes. Like, it's become a new thing now where if you're a real journalist, you will not endorse an idea, which means you're proud to not know anything about the people who espouse those ideas or have those questions. You don't even want to understand them, because then you're going to be criticized as being affiliated with them and endorsing them. Versus, like, when I first got in the business, you were trying to understand what was going on. Even if you, at the end of the day, got to the bottom of it and you said this person's nuts, you at least wanted to look into it. You weren't proud of your ignorance. But nowadays, it's like, it's just one of those things now where your dissociation makes you a better journalist, which is totally bizarre. Okay, shall we discontinue the YouTube stream? And is there any final thoughts, I guess, you'd like to give the YouTube audience? I'll go back to your book again if people want to pick it up. It's Cause Unknown: The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022.
Well, if you're a YouTube person and you don't want to go to Rumble, I understand, but Rumble is where you're going to figure out what the causes of this sudden epidemic are. Right now, you won't, but if you want to remain in ignorance, don't go to Rumble.
If you want to, yeah, there you go. Okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. We will see you over there.